Hello students, good morning. I am Dr. Shobha MS, Department of Microbiology, Maharani Science College for Women, Mysore. So students, since because of the lockdown, we'll be doing online classes for you and we'll send you some records, some PPTs, some videos, notes and MCQs. Okay. So in your second semester, I'll be taking you the third unit. Okay. In that, I'll be taking you the nutritional requirements of the microorganisms and the growth of the microorganisms. So, we'll directly start with the lesson. Nutrition. What do I mean by nutrition? Nutrition means it is the requirement of anything, maybe of microorganisms or animals, birds, etc. So the nutritional requirements is very much essential for the growth and for the overall development of the particular living being. So here we'll be talking only about the nutrition of the microorganisms. So the microorganisms, they require nutrition like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, iron, cobalt, calcium, etc. So these elements are required by the microorganisms depending on their uses. So usually carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, they are required in large quantities by the microorganisms for different purposes, like for the overall growth of the bones, then for the growth of the living organism, for the reproduction, for the processing of the food, excretion, and for many other physiological processes. And there are some elements, they are required in very minute quantities, milligrams, but it is very much essential. Without that milligram quantity of that element, the functioning of the body will be stopped, will be inhibited, so it will not take place. For example, if it wants to produce a photosynthesis, if it is a photosynthetic bacteria, it requires magnesium, and if magnesium is not present, then the chlorophyll will not function the process of photosynthesis. So most of our biochemical reactions, they require the microelements like cobalt, zinc in very minute quantities, and without, they act as the cofactors. They stimulate the enzymes and bring about the biochemical reactions inside the body. If they are not present, then that biochemical reaction will be stopped. For example, if there is imagine there is a growth hormone which needs cobalt as a cofactor. If it is not produced, then the growth will not take place. So like this, there are some elements, essential nutrients required by the microorganisms in large quantities, and some of them are required in minute quantities. So those which are required in large quantities are called as macro elements, and in small quantities are called as the micro elements. So these macro elements are required in very large quantities. They include some elements like carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, potassium, calcium, magnesium and iron. These are referred as the macro elements or macronutrients. They are used for the construction of the body parts such as the carbohydrates, lipids, proteins and nucleic acids. We'll study the requirements of each of them one by one briefly. So the requirement of these three elements, that is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, the macro elements, is required in large quantity by almost all the living organisms. Their use for the building blocks of carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. One of the exception is the carbon dioxide, because it is the most oxidized form of carbon and it is not that very useful to our body. But carbon sources, they are used in our body in large quantities. So there is most of the microorganisms utilizes this carbon sources with extraordinary flexibility. Some of them, the carbon sources like glucose, it is almost used by almost all the microorganisms. Complex carbohydrates like sucrose, dextrose, arabinose, etc., which are disaccharides, are used by some microorganisms. They have got certain enzymes, they break down these disaccharides to the monosaccharides and they make use of the monosaccharides. So, like this, the complexes like starch, polysaccharides, even those are broken down by only few organisms. They have got particular enzymes and they break down this polysaccharides into monosaccharides and they use the monosaccharides. So like this, the carbon flexibility or the uses of the carbon by the microorganisms is almost in the form of glucose in a simpler form, and it is used by abundantly by most of the microorganisms. For example, even actinomycetes, it is known to degrade amylo alcohol, paraffin and rubber, which are the sources of compound. Not all, but few, but actinomycetes can do this. Some bacteria makes use has the carbon uh, over nearly 100 different carbon compounds. For example, Pseudomonas sepsia, it makes use of 100 varieties of carbon compounds. So like this, carbon is a very much essential component of all the living organisms. Along with this, even we make use of the hydrogen. The CHO bonds has been produced inside our bones, in the DNA, RNA, etc. For all the things, the hydrogen, carbon and oxygen are used. Then oxygen is also some bacteria is also used by some bacteria. There are some bacteria which makes use of some complex carbonic compounds like methylotropic bacteria. They make use of methane, methanol, then carbon monoxide and some other related carbons. So like this, they make use of the carbon as the source of energy and for the production of the body structures. So oxygen is also used, hydrogen is also used. There are different forms they are used, hydrogen component, and because oxygen is present, is a constant of the cell, water and organic cellular materials, it is required as molecular oxygen for the respiration of the aerobic organisms. And for hydrogen is also one of the cellularly important compounds. Requirements of nitrogen, phosphorus and sulfur. The synthesis of most important molecules like amino acids, nucleic acids, RNA, DNA, some enzymes, all requires the components of the nitrogen or phosphorus or sulfur. So nitrogen is one of the most important component. It is used for the production of the nucleic acids and amino acids. So phosphorus is also another important component which is used in the DNA. Then sulfur, they are used for most of the enzymes. Requirements of nitrogen. Nitrogen is synthesized, it is used for synthesis of amino acids that makes up the proteins, purines, pyrimidines of both DNA and RNA. Then microorganisms directly makes use of nitrogen either from amino acids or from the ammonia group, or by the action of the enzymes. It breaks down by enzymes like glutamatic dehydrogenase and converts them into the useful form and makes use of that. So most of the photoautotrophic and non-phototropic organisms reduce this nitrate to ammonia and assimilate the nitrogen through nitrate reduction. So a variety of bacteria are also involved in the nitrogen cycle. Rhizobium is one of them, which is a bacteria which converts nitrogen into ammonia. It is seen in the clover plants, leguminous plants, etc. So all these they are found in the nitrogen cycle, and you'll study them in the next chapters. Requirements of the phosphorus. Phosphorus is present in phospholipids, in the membranes, nucleic acids, DNA and RNA, coenzymes, ATPs, some proteins and some other cellular components. Inorganic phosphorus is derived from the environment in the form of the phosphates. Some microorganisms such as E. coli can use these organophosphates such as hexose 6 phosphate. Now, sources of phosphate are organic phosphates and inorganic phosphates. Requirements of sulfur. Sulfur, it is used for the synthesis of the proteins, synthesis of vitamins, and also involved in cellular respiration and photosynthesis. There are some bacteria which makes use of the sulfur, nitrogen, and phosphorus for the respiration, or they make use as the components for their food. Sulfur sources, it is obtained either from the organic sulfurs by the chemo heterotrophic bacteria, or it is used by the oxidized inorganic sulfurs, sulfates, or in the reduced inorganic sulfur, sulfides, or has the elemental sulfur. Another important component of the body is the bone structure. The calcium component makes the bone fit and fragile without any breakability or flexibility. The body contains more calcium than any other minerals. They're essential for a number of important functions such as maintenance of the bones, teeth, blood clotting, and normal muscular functions. In milk, cheese, and many other dairy products are rich and supplement high quantity of calcium in our diet. Other than that, some of the microorganisms, the cell wall in peptidoglycan layer, calcium is associated with a compound and gives stability to the cell. Next one is the sodium. Sodium is found in all the cells and body fluids. It is needed for regulating the amount of water and other substances in the body. Sodium is a component of tablet salt which is known as sodium chloride. It intakes the UK. In UK, its intake is found to be very high. It is recommended that the adults and the children 11 years and over not to have more than 6 grams of salt per day. Young children should eat less. High sodium intake is considered to be one of the risk factors for the blood pressure. Other than that, the sodium, it is a regulatory one which regulates the import and export of the nutrients in the most of the bacteria. Iron, it is an essential for the formation of hemoglobin in the RBCs. So they carry oxygen, transport it to the parts of the body in the hemoglobin. Iron is also required for the normal metabolism and removing waste materials from the body system. Do you know that there are two types of iron? One is from the animal fat, another one is from the plant sources. The animal fats includes the liver and red meat, and plant sources includes the pulses, dark green leafy vegetables, a very essential component of the iron for the hemoglobin built up in our body. Next one is the potassium. It is one of the principal organic cations required universally. It is involved especially in the activation of varieties of enzymes, including those in protein synthesis. It acts as mainly as a cofactor for many enzymes. Magnesium, it is also a very most important component in the cell and functions to stabilize the ribosome, cell membranes, and nucleic acids. It is also required for the activity of many enzymes, especially the ATP molecules, and also in most of the aerobic processes like enzymes, hexokinases, or in the conversion of the glucose to the pyruvate. Many enzymes there require magnesium as a cofactor. So it is found as a cofactor for the photosynthesis process for the enzyme chlorophyll. So it is one of the most important component which is essential for stimulating the enzymes to perform its functions. Without it, the functions will not take place. Okay, thank you. So all these things what we studied now were the macronutrients. Without macronutrients, all the living beings cannot perform their body or the cellular functions for undergoing the overall development. For the different physiological activities of the body, they require the macronutrients in huge quantities. So we call them as the macro essential nutrients of the body. So in the next class, we'll be doing the micronutrients. Till then, goodbye. Take care. Stay home. Stay safe. And girls, I have given some 5 NCQs. So you keep a book and write down the NCQs in a book. And when you come to the college, you bring that book and you should give it to me. Okay? Oh, okay. Bye then.